power levels greater than 4,000. And here we are, folks. Thanks for tuning into the Banff Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lafferty. And let me introduce everyone quickly and then tell you why I'm troubled about today's episode subject. Aid Smith, how you doing, Aid?
Not too bad, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. That's Aid of Mesozoic Press. He also does a lot of the art and layout here at Fainting Goat. And you got a respectable freelance writing career here now, don't you, Aid?
Respectable, I don't know. I have a minor freelance writing career at the moment, but it's ticking along nicely at the moment.
So working for Green Ronin, and you're also working on the new Star Trek RPG, right?
I have stuff for Green Ronin coming out. We still are waiting for the compilation of the villains book that the lovely Crystal McLaughlin put me on, and the Star Trek Adventure stuff. Yeah, we have all of that coming along as well. So
okay,
all good.
And I'm being assured that Freedom City Third Ed will be up for pre-orders just any day now, and that has been the case for about a month. So we'll wait and see what happens.
That's any day.
Yeah.
Soon is the quotation most people use. That's the best one.
Soon. Sitting next to Aid here in the luxurious Banff podcast recording bunker is Mr. Jacob Blackman. How you doing, Jacob?
Hello, doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence. It's always a pleasure. Next to Jacob is Mr. Jason Tondro. How you doing, Jason?
I'm great. It's a good day.
All right. Thanks for coming. And next to Jason and before Walt is Christopher McLaughlin. How you doing, Chris?
I am happily exhausted, sir. I hope you're well.
Oh, okay. Why are you exhausted?
I'm just having a great teaching year, but it takes a lot out of you. It really does. I mean, it just, my teaching style is kind of like 70s Meatloaf. It's like I do a great show and like immediately collapse and need oxygen afterwards. It may have something to do with the fact that my physical condition is roughly approximate to 70s Meatloaf, but we'll see.
That is a wonderful analogy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I don't remember that from Mr. Cotter.
You and I probably teach in a lot of the same way, Chris. I mean, I'm not going to compare myself to Meatloaf, but my students on their evals always say the same thing. Like, he's so high energy in classroom, and the biggest problem with me is that I'm so high energy in the classroom. Like, I get both sides of it,
there's a liquor store owner I talk to occasionally because his store is right next to where my kid takes his swim lessons. So Connor's learning back floats. I'll go pick up an energy drink and I'll talk about the day's events with the guy who owns a liquor store. And I'm like, so why do you open at 7 a.m.? This isn't really a question you should ask a liquor store owner because the answer is as obvious if you think about it for even a second. But he enlightened me something I didn't know about. He's like, well, on weekdays it's school teachers. I said, you're shitting me. He goes, nah, man. Before junior high and high school's open, I get a lot of guys in here doing shots. We're buying shots and saving them for later.
I have no response to that.
Yeah, and I thought about Jason and Chris when he said that. And next to Chris McLaughlin is Walt Rebillard. How you doing, Walt?
Not bad. I am also high energy in the classroom, but my students, I get to choke and slam on the floor.
Yeah, you're high energy because you are punching them.
I think a lot of teachers would like to trade places with you for a day.
Yeah. The satisfactory part really isn't the slamming of the students because you're teaching them to fall and teaching them the benefits of some of the stuff that you're doing that they can carry through to a lifetime. But the real joy of teaching children in martial arts is watching the horrified look in the parents the first time you pick their child up off the floor and slam them down at a rate of speed,
yeah,
that can be considered obscene. So fun times.
Outside of the dojo, that's called assault.
Yes, but luckily inside the dojo, we get paid for it.
All right, so I got a joke there I'm not going with, but here we are. And the subject of today is talking about ersatz characters. We're going to use the words ersatz because everyone hates the word ersatz, so we were going to use homage. And the cheeky title for this episode is going to be Learning to Love Captain Homage. And I was just worried about this subject because I was afraid maybe it was too ill-defined and wide-reaching. Because if you think about it, and I mean, people get picky about plagiarism in all forms of, media, but in comics, I mean, there's so many characters who are, the other character with, a slight tweak. I mean, Moon Knight and Batman, Hyperion and Superman. And I mean, there's whole villain groups from Marvel or DC who are mirrors of, you know, characters. I mean, that you've got, well, that was the whole point of Squadron Supreme. So, you know, it's almost rampant in comics. And if you look at RPGs, hell, we had Jeff D just on last week, and one of the big changes they made to Mighty Protectors, which we're not calling Vigilants and Vigilantes 3.0 for various legal reasons, is people want to play Batman. They want to play Batman in your superhero RPG. They want to play him out of the gate. No, he's not going to be called Batman. He'll be called something else, but you want your rules to support people playing Batman because he's the character people want to do their own variation on. So, so yeah, I was kind of wrestling with this because, like I said, I was afraid maybe it was too broad of a subject to cover, you know, in a satisfying way. But that has never stopped us before here at the BAM podcast. And that kind of gonzo journalism is what keeps you guys coming back. So, Chris McLaughlin, as a man employed for quite some time by Green Ronin,
yes,
publishers of Mutants and Masterminds, which, you know, as one of the preeminent superhero RPGs for many, many years. Your guys' catalog is full of what we can call homage characters.
Oh yeah, proudly so, openly so, gladly so.
So what do you think about this? I mean, is this something? I mean, obviously the industry embraces it, both comics and RPGs.
Well, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that, you know, a lot of it, especially amongst the comic companies, is done for commercial reasons. I mean, you're just trying to get your little cut of whatever's hot, whatever's selling. And, you know, I mean, you know, we would never have had, you know, what's this new Marvel thing, Legacy? Yeah. We'd never have had that if Rebirth hadn't have, you know, buried Marvel's sales for most of the past year or so. But at least when it comes to RPGs and stuff, we are, and I guess, you know, like you say, there's a certain commercial aspect to it from the RPG point of view, because yeah, we have people come up to our table and want to play Batman, and you know, we want to reassure them that yes, here's what Batman would be like in the game. We also had the, you know, and this is coming from somebody who's twice had the advantage of actually working on licensed DC stuff, so I could actually just straight do Batman and not have to put any other layers on it. But, you know, at least for the folks that have worked on M&M that I've gotten to know, there's another aspect to it. You know, we fully realize that there are people out there that want to do like wholly original universes and just want to do their own kind of weird thing. And those people are going to pass by on a lot of what we write anyway. But there's I think a larger section of superhero RPG fans that they're like us. They love these comics, and a lot of the homages that we've done are just, I mean, they're Valentines, they're love letters, they're expressions of how much we love these characters. And certainly, you know, my love of characters, especially characters nobody else seems to love, has informed a lot of what I've written. And in fact, one of the most delightful things that happens to me is if I'm inspired by some obscure character and somebody actually gets the reference, that's a really special moment. Like one of the Rogues Gallery villains that I worked on is based off of wow. Okay, this may be a bigger statement than I intended to be, but one of Barry Allen's lamer foes, one of his least loved foes, the Rainbow Raider. Yeah, the guy whose actual name is Roy G. Bivolo.
that's Silver Age right there. Son.
Oh, absolutely. He's technically Bronze Age, but yes, I mean that's so in keeping with that aesthetic that you know if you're born Leland Owlsley, you're bound to develop our you know owl-based powers at some point. So yes, there is that. And then I did a Rogues Gallery villain called Spectrum based on him, and I was so happy that like among the first 3 comments I got on it was like, well, somebody's a Rainbow Raider fan. I'm like, yes. So yeah, that made me feel good. But I just, okay, now just talking about me, okay, I will cease speaking for Steve and Aid and all the other great people that have worked on M&M over the years. To me, if you're going to do an homage character, one of the best ways you can do that is to try to reference things other than the comic books themselves. One of the things that I am personally proud of in my writing is that the things I've done, they're only partially comic book homages. I reference other things with them. Like I'm right now in my writer's room, and as you might imagine, I'm staring at my innies because I do that a lot, frankly. And I'm looking at the one for Time of Vengeance, which if you helped make that happen, I love you. Awesome. Thank you for making that happen for me 10 years ago. But I mean, Time of Vengeance, it's technically there's a lot of my love of like weird Bronze Age comics like Steve Gerber and David Anthony Kraft's run on the Defenders. But the plot itself is basically the Ten Commandments meets the Abominable Dr. Phibes meets Citizen Kane. So the fact that I'm proud of the fact that there's a lot of it in there that didn't come from superhero-like material, and to me, that's one way that if you're doing your own homages, you can make them fresh and different and unpredictable in that regard. And I'm proud that I've always been able to do things like that.
Yeah, Walt and I actually have a Warehouse 13 homage in Stark City.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, actually, Walt wrote that up. I did some of the editing on it. But yeah, I don't think anyone's ever caught that, though. But
yeah, I mean,
I did the layout, so I didn't even recognize that. Where's
you know, the villain that I was happiest with in Rogues Gallery was I did a villain called the Osprey, and there's a little bit of Grant Morrison's DC enemy Prometheus in it, but the vast majority of that character comes from Boris Karloff's character in the 1935 version of the Black Cat. So I mean, he's 90% drawn from a Universal horror film. And I have a gang of satanic bikers that's drawn from every misbegotten night I've spent watching 70s biker films. Where I have an alarming number of films in my collection that the plot synopsis is gang of bikers terrorizes ordinary folks. So yeah, I've tried to draw on things like that. So to me that's the key.
So I'm guessing you're probably pretty excited about the dark and gritty reboot of the Universal Monster Universe, right?
No.
Okay.
because I mean
That's a surprise.
Okay, there's back. I'm going to show my age here, but I was actually around for the theatrical release of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And whatever else you think of the Bill and Ted series, I love the fact that the first movie was marketed with the line, "History is about to be rewritten by two guys who can't spell." and that's kind of my attitude about when a reboot of something that probably doesn't need to be rebooted is in the hands of somebody who just has no clue what the original was about. Because anybody who saw any of the good Mummy films like the Boris Karloff original, or suffered through the 85 films where a drunk and overweight Lon Chaney is staggering across scenery trying to act threatening from an actress who will just conveniently trip over something. I mean, I don't know how anybody could look at what made those films so great, so memorable, so loved, and so watchable after all these years and go, yeah, let's make Tom Cruise a superhero and throw in Dr. Jekyll. What the fuck? Why not? It's so clearly being done by people who have no clue why people love these films after nearly a century. So I can't work up any enthusiasm for that at all.
Weirdly enough, Bride of Frankenstein was announced at the beginning of the week to be in production, and then yesterday it was announced to be pushed back out of production again. So that's interesting.
I gotta confess, I just brought that up to hear Chris go on one of his rants because I hadn't heard one in a while.
Thank you.
So, well, Chris had a very interesting point of view there. Aid, what do you think?
About using them generally in comics, not a problem. Doesn't bother me. Or even in RPGs. Again, even if you use them as a, say, take it Freedom City more than anything else. If you've got a Batman character, then it allows someone to say, okay, now I understand what I'm doing. This is how I create Batman. That's fine. And there's always going to be someone that there's always going to be like the guy or the kid who's like on the fringes of comics and goes, okay, who do you want to be? I'll be Batman because that's the only guy I know, or Spider-Man. And if you've got that character at least laid out, then you can say that works for you. There you go, off you trot kind of thing. So. But in comics generally, generally speaking, a lot of those homage characters, that especially cross-company ones, are the multiversal versions, aren't they? So if there's an alternate universe or an alternate timeline, then the alternate universe of the Avengers come up to fight the Justice League. That's perfectly acceptable. I love that.
Yeah, I would imagine like the Ultimates Captain America would have words with the cinematic universe Captain America, both of which probably wouldn't like, say, the Secret Empire Captain America. But yeah,
hopefully the comic books versions would beat the movie versions to death, and then they'd never come back again. But hey, that's
there was some fan theory for a while that the Secret Empire Captain America was the Ultimates Captain America.
See, but at least in that would be smarter.
Yeah, which would explain why he was such a fascist dick.
What? I thought you liked Captain America in the movie.
No, we're talking about the Ultimate comics. Ultimate Captain America was a fascist.
That was the guy who pointed at his head and said, "You think this A stands for?"
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misinterpreted your statement completely.
He agreed to, use the Avengers as a world police force, despite the fact that it was against the law.
See, why didn't they do? Okay, that's ridiculous. Then, if that was the rumor, why didn't they just do that? That makes even more sense. After having Secret Wars and the entire collapse of the universe, to have the Maker come through from the Ultimate universe, why not bring that Cap version come through? That would make so much more sense. And Magic did it, and then Magic put it right again, and nothing really counted, so it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to agree. Yeah, that's.
But it's I like homage characters. I like, it's like Chris said, I like to be able to spot references that hopefully other people have never seen before, and the idea of building off of stuff outside of comics as well, either movies or whatever. I mean, we've all seen hey, it's Godzilla, but he's purple. In the first drop of the hat, you can say, okay, that's really cool. But yes, I'm not as educated as my colleague, so I can't go into the intricacies of it all.
I don't buy that for a second.
No, that's too true.
Can I jump in, Mike?
Yeah, please, Jason. You were the next one I was going to tag anyway. So
well, so I just kind of had like 2 points. The first off is I think that in comics, if you think back to the origins of these homage characters in comics, and I'm thinking about like the first appearance of the Squadron Supreme and stuff like that. And by the way, one day we're going to have the debate over this Moon Knight thing, because he is not like Batman at all. And I'm going to make that argument, but not today.
Okay, all right.
But I think a lot of it, the Marvel creators come up with Squadron Supreme and stuff because they could not legally do the crossover that they wanted to do, right? Those of us that are JLA Avengers fans or have read into that history of that book, and we've seen Perez's original pencils and all kinds of stuff. There were legal obstacles to having those characters actually show up, and you would do this cross universe plot line with I'm thinking of the original Squadron Supreme storyline with the Serpent Crown and everything. I don't remember where that showed up in Avengers, but it was one of the first comic books I remember reading, so it must be dinosaur old. So a lot of that was kind of prompted by legal stuff. Like if you're Marvel and you can't have Superman and Batman and the Justice League show up, but you want to do that story, and your creators are having fun, and there's no one to tell them not to. And you're like, well, let's just do this, and we can tell that story, and everybody will get the joke, and we can also make it part of the intercompany rivalry that was really fun at that time. If you remember, like calling DC the distinguished competition, and Marvel would always kind of Stan would make comments about them in his letter column every month, and there was kind of a fun, I'm a Marvel fan, you're a DC fan, and I'm better than you, and kind of rivalry. And I think it kind of played into that. But then let's get back to the kind of RPG thing. I think we have to acknowledge that whether or not we like it or approve of it, or whether or not we think that it's a good kind of game product to publish, players do this a lot. Like the standard campaign setting for a superhero game when we were in high school was, okay, we're just going to play in the Marvel Universe. Like, that's what they do. You do your own game. Everybody makes it. And they might make up their own original characters. But this is before we had a lot of superhero settings in which to set our games. Villains and Vigilantes was it. There was the Champions universe. And there wasn't really a whole lot else. And all of those settings were kind of evolving as we were playing. And it was hard to get a hold of a lot of those books sometimes. We have this, we're blessed with the internet where we can buy anything we want from RPG Now, or we can steal it from a PDF source or whatever. But you couldn't get a lot of that.
Podcast does not endorse piracy. Sorry.
we paid the iron price, whatever you want to call it. But when we were kids, kind of coming up with our own superhero games, we did that, and it wasn't just amateurs. If you remember, sort of the gold standard for superhero campaigns is Strike Force. And Strike Force was originally a Marvel, DC, all those superheroes all in one universe setting, and Austin had to strip all that shit out when he wrote the book to publish it, right? Everybody does this, and it's because it's fun. And like Chris and Abe were saying, we love these characters, and so we're going to put them in our game. And back in the late 80s, we didn't have a whole lot of other options when it came to building a campaign setting. Now you do. Now you've got all these other worlds, and you can buy Freedom City and just plunk your players down in it, and you can just go. But in the early days of gaming, we couldn't, and I think that going to a superhero universe that was already established was pretty normal.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, it's only been since the birth of small publishing that you get to see everybody's little baby universes that they spend years and years writing. And
yeah, that's a really good point too. I think that the open gaming license kind of revolution, where anybody could now publish whatever they wanted, and the access to places like RPG Now has allowed people to create not only their own universes but also their own homages, right? And we get to Jacob's book and his long ongoing series of products, which is doing exactly this, and that would have been a lot harder for you to do 20 years ago, Jacob. I don't know if you could have done it.
Probably not.
Can we talk about his book?
Sure.
No, I'm sorry. Please go ahead. Jacob, do you have a book?
I have a book. Well, I have a Kickstarter that will hopefully produce a book.
Walt, I promise we'll get back to you. We're not passing you by.
It's all good.
This has been coming out every week for like a couple of years. I mean, you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 2 years now, and I've had a product at least once a week. There have been a couple of times where we've missed that weekly goal, but that's usually predicated on me being out of town at like Gen Con or something.
Well, you made up for it when you have multiple characters in a product, probably.
Oh yeah, because we've got over 100 PDFs right now, and easily 190 plus characters scattered among all those PDFs. But right now, Rogue Genius Games is running a Kickstarter to collect all the current PDFs that are out there into a single massive tome called the Superpowered Legends Sourcebook. And the basic idea is, which we have funded already, is we're going to collect all the existing PDFs, and we've already hit a couple of stretch goals, which now includes adding a timeline for the universe that I've been building up over the years, and getting a couple other things out there. We've got some art books that we're going to be releasing, and hopefully, if we can hit some more of the higher stretch goals, we'll be including some world information which we've been missing. So what's it like in China or Egypt or Great Britain with all these superheroes going on? Because mostly I've been focusing on the United States because that's what I'm familiar with. But I'm hoping to get some more worldly information out there, especially since I've gotten really inspired by the Atlas of Earth Prime by Green Ronin.
Well, you're also you're homaging the Marvel universe, and most Marvel characters live in New York. I mean, there are characters that live in other countries, but they're far outnumbered.
Yeah, even with those homage characters, I've been doing my best to spread them out across the United States and the world in general, because that many people just in New York alone, with that many super battles, can you imagine what New York would actually look like?
Well, this is the difference between a comic and a game, right? Like in a comic, everybody just accepts that all these heroes live in New York. But if it's a game, your players will inevitably ask, "Well, let's call Spider-Man," right? And you're like, "Okay, I don't want you." Or the Spider-Man's busy. We call the Fantastic Four. They're not answering. We call the Avengers. Okay, dude, solve your own problems, right?
Yeah,
And
what's happened in games that I've been in the past, where we've done that, even in our own superhero universes, where we're like, why don't we call the big name super team for this? And it's like, and I'm like, they have their own comic, solve your own problems.
Yeah, you have to just talk to the players and say, listen, if you want the Avengers to come in and solve your problems, we can do that, but this is going to become an Avengers campaign instead of your guys' game.
Exactly.
Right? And so maybe let's solve it on our own, and then, spreading the heroes out is good. That's good.
Yeah, the basic idea of the Superpowered Legends universe is I was producing characters based on Marvel comics. The reason I focused on Marvel is because the DC characters had already been done by Green Ronin.
That's right.
So I want to show, if you wanted to look up a material of how will I build this character for, how I build Superman, you can just go to the Green Ronin book, and there you go. You got Superman. But not Spider-Man, not Thor. So I wanted to show this is how you build this character.
That's cool.
But I don't have the rights to those. So in the classic homage, like we've been talking about, where the characters that are similar to but not quite, I gave them the general ideas of their powers, but they otherwise have different names, different backgrounds, that sort of thing.
Well, that makes sense because mechanically the powers is the most complicated part, and that's the part that players are going to be looking at when they want to make their own version of these characters.
Exactly.
Sort of like Webster as compared to Arnold Drummond. Same basic concept, different implementation. You had to be pretty old and familiar with American television to even get that, but
I confess I didn't get it.
So yeah, I thought Webster was a Spider-Man character.
No. You don't know who Manuel Lewis is? Webster, 1980 TV? Nobody?
Not at all.
Chris does.
All right. If I explain the joke, it takes the magic away, so we'll just plow forward. If I want to back your Kickstarter, hey, wait, Chris just left. Damn, don't make different strokes jokes around Chris. Holy shit, he just dropped. So, all right.
No,
Chris,
he's back.
He's
Chris,
back.
you're back. I was afraid I drove you away with my references to campy 70s television, but glad to see you came back. But he is silent, so okay. Hopefully, he's getting that taken care of. So if you go to Kickstarter, do a search for Superpowered Legends. You can find Jacob's Kickstarter.
Hello.
It's already funded. Hey, Chris, I was afraid I drove you away with my Gary Coleman joke.
Well, I couldn't let you get away because I have a story about that. I was listening to the audio commentary on the Black Dynamite animated series, and Michael Jai White was talking about how they did an episode of the Black Dynamite animated series where they reference Gary Coleman, and Michael Jai White was talking about how Gary Coleman used to work out at the same gym as he was, and they had this very, very odd relationship where like they were friends, but like they would play like physical pranks on you. Like he would go up, pick Gary up, and Gary would respond by kicking him in the shins as hard as he could. And he said the most embarrassing day of his life was he went up to pick Gary Coleman up and lift him up where it said like he was going to body slam him. And it wasn't until the guy started screaming that he realized he picked up Emmanuel Lewis by mistake. So yeah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to use that story. and I tell you, I wanted to follow up on something Jason was talking about. When your players invariably ask for help. One of the great joys of writing Adventures for Mutants and Masterminds, that when we would use the Freedom City setting, is in every single adventure coming up with a different outlandish reason of why every single one of our existing heroes couldn't be there.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah, I think maybe Time of Vengeance, like I wrote out the Freedom League because I remember just spinning my globe around and picking a random country, and I think that they were on a special mission to I think I remember if it was Ethiopia or Djibouti. It was somewhere in East Africa. So yeah, I know what you're saying there, man.
And to this whole kind of the homage thing has become, well, for a while there in the 2000s, it was kind of a spinal column to a lot of comics, like The Authority. If you remember, they met a different group of homage characters almost every 4 issues in that book.
Planetary,
yes, and that was where I was going next. Exactly. Yeah. And it becomes, and this is one of the interesting things, is that this is what makes homages so great. If you want to tell a Superman story or a Batman story, you don't have the rights to Batman. But because he's so much a part of the global consciousness, you can still write that story. And you can call him something else, and he looks a little different, but everybody will recognize him, and they can still read your story, and they'll still get it. This power can be used for good, or it can be used for bad. And I'm talking about Frank Miller's Holy Terror, where he takes a Batman story that DC wouldn't let him publish, cuts off Catwoman's ears, and reprints it as Holy Terror.
What does it say about a Frank Miller story when it's so utterly batshit? Not even DC will publish it.
You know, and the funny thing is that artistically, the book is kind of amazing. Like I know Miller's art doesn't appeal to everybody, but in my opinion, he was kind of at the top of his game. It was really amazing. Now, except for the parts where he forgot to cut off Catwoman's ears in a couple of pages, and you can still see that she looks just like Catwoman still. But it's kind of a guilty pleasure to look through that book because it's so batshit crazy, and yet it looks so good.
Okay, I've got a question, but I don't want to leave Walt out. I don't want to leave Walt hanging that he can't do his opinion. So, is that cool? Okay, can anyone think of a homage character that either Marvel have done or DC have done that's either been as popular or more popular than the original?
Oh,
because I can't think of any at the moment. At all. They always come out as second string characters. It's Captain America done. Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Actually, I can. I can. Okay. All right. Now, admittedly, this is kind of a matter of perspective, kind of a borderline thing. But okay, now I admit that if it's possible, I'm going to wade into a controversy that I have no strong opinion about. But okay. But as you all know, there is this debate in comics fandom. Did the Doom Patrol rip off the X-Men, or did X-Men rip off Doom Patrol?
Yeah,
right. All right. Okay. Playing devil's advocate here. Okay. Yeah. If the X-Men really was influenced in any way whatsoever by Doom Patrol, let's face it, the X-Men have left the Doom Patrol in their dust.
Yeah. I was going to say Swamp Thing, Man Thing. But I'm not sure.
Man Thing's bigger than Swamp Thing?
But which came first? Swamp Thing.
Yeah, I think Swamp Thing was first, but I'm not sure which of those characters is less popular because they're both kind of unpopular.
Swamp Thing had a series. He had 2 theatrical movies. Man Thing got that Marvel movie that they dumped on the Sci-Fi Channel, or excuse me, Sci-Fi or whatever they're calling it these days.
Swamp
Thing pretty clearly wins that one.
Swamp Thing is also getting a resurgence because of Len Weed's involvement.
Swamp Thing is fantastic. One of my favorite characters. Well, I love Doom Patrol as well, so I must really like these second string characters.
Well, you know, for a long stretch there in the 80s and 90s, Captain America was kind of awful. But, but DC had a version of him called General Glory. Who was JLA, who was sort of a mentor to Guy Gardner, and he was actually everything you ever wanted Captain America to be, except he didn't give long sophomoric soliloquies while he was punching guys. And he was a great character. I wish they'd never killed him off. But so yeah, just another example. And before anyone else can talk, Walt, weigh in.
181 pounds. Sorry.
But it's all muscle.
Well, table muscle, some of it. Characters like this that are clear copies with the serial numbers filed off. RPGs, like everybody was saying, I mean, it just gives a player someplace to start. Just gives somebody a great way. I mean, we did it in Supers. You can see our brown Batman or the guy who's clearly Daredevil. I mean, there's just it's just an easy way at the table to say, hey, have you seen this? Especially with all the slew of movies out. I mean, you can say, hey, you said you wanted to play a Daredevil type character. Here, look at this power array or whatever, and there's a piece of art there that might give the guy some inspiration. But I mean, I think that the place that this really shines right now, and I'm gonna beat the same drum that I have had to reskin several times, is indie comics. I mean, look at Stray. Vito Del Sante, who's been on the show several times, had said, hey, this is my Nightwing. This is my love letter to that character. And you're seeing this all throughout. my friend Nick is about to launch a Kickstarter for Apogee Comics, and the character that they're going to be launching and talking about. When you look at the artwork, you'll know what character that's supposed to be until you start reading the story, and then it goes batshit crazy from there. But I mean, I think indie comics has a great history right now of taking characters that we've known and loved for all these decades and really reinvigorating them, because if you look at how stale some of these stories have become, Man's been around for, almost a century. Superman, the same thing. Spider-Man's been around for half a century. I mean, how long can this guy be a teenager? How long can you be so pissed at your parents that you have to run around in a bat suit and tell the same stories over and over again? Jason, earlier you had mentioned the Serpent Crown. Yeah. That this was a very early Avengers story. They just redid it in Avengers a couple of years ago. I mean, so I think that these Ersatz, homage characters that you're seeing really have new life in the indie scene, because the publishers that really want to do something with a character that they feel haven't been done, they can do that by filing off the serial numbers, and you've got such a ton of good stuff out there right now. But I think going back to something that the entire panel has experience with, actually using characters that you can get your hands on. Look at stuff like Project Superpowers. Jason did the Supervillains Handbook and made the universe. These are public domain superheroes. So now people can tell their Black Terror story, which I'm a huge Black Terror fan. I love that character. That's
because he has a badass costume.
Right. And because he was a pharmacist who became badass. How cool is that? I mean, there's just, I think that the indie scene has a great way to take characters that they've known and loved for all these decades and revitalize them, give them a new look and a new feel. And I think that if we start looking at indies rather than getting so upset of Captain America's a Nazi. Yeah, well, he's a Nazi 3 other times in the comics. Why are you so upset now? Or Superman's dead. Yeah, okay, yeah. For now, I mean, if we don't want to get upset about those stories, let's give some of these other writers who get to play around with some of these tropes in their own versions of the character, and put our time, devotion, and hard-earned money that way, and hopefully that'll tell these big companies like, hey, nobody wants to see this again. With the advent of the internet, Marvel and Comixology Unlimited, we can read these stories. We don't need to see them again and again and again and again.
Well, let me, if I may, respectfully disagree. And I have an off the wall analogy, because that seems to be my talent in life.
Please.
Okay. All right. For most of my life, I really, really, really intensely followed professional wrestling, or as my friends described it, my attempt to waste my college education. And the type of wrestling that I loved was sort of the offbeat stuff. I really loved like the crazy athleticism that you only saw in like Japanese or Mexican wrestling, or the longer, more detailed storylines that you would get in something like ECW out of Philadelphia, or some of the great classic Southern promotions. But the one thing they all have in common is they were original, they were creative, and they were only going to be so popular. Being truly original, most of the time you're going to hit a ceiling. It's like, my whole week was made by the fact that I turned on my satellite radio and I got to hear some Velvet Underground, one of the greatest rock bands of all time, and I think their best-selling album sold 500 copies. So yeah, but there's a huge financial.
Okay. I mean, there were no monkeys. You know what I mean? Sorry, go ahead.
but to me, there is a market out there for seeing the same old stories. To me, one of the greatest minds in professional wrestling history was writer, booker, manager Jim Cornette. And Cornette came up with the Cornette maxim, and that is your audience is going to completely turn over every 5 to 7 years. So you're completely welcome to reuse storylines for 5 to 7 years, because the audience that remembers that is either gone or doesn't care that they're seeing the same thing over and over again.
They graduated.
So, yeah, or eighth grade, as it may work out. You never know. But I mean, that to me is like WWE. I mean, I can't watch WWE for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is they're doing stuff that's either stupid or done to death. But Vince McMahon is a billionaire. His wife is in the Trump administration right now, working for the president. So you don't go broke by retelling the same stories. And as long as there are people out there, and I'm not a shining example of this, but there are people out there, and maybe it's just a whole new audience that's turned up. They want to see Peter Parker, his life turned to shit, and they want to see Batman have parent issues. Because it's all new to them.
So the irony. Sorry.
Okay.
Is there really a new audience though? Or is there just a siren call of nostalgia?
Well, it's like Cornette said. It's either people who've legitimately never seen it before, or people that don't care that they're seeing it again.
Let's say the irony being that most people don't like change. They want Spider-Man to always be that down on his luck guy. So they don't want to say, well, he's a head of a corporation now. No, get that shit out of here. We want to see him back on the streets. We don't want to see him. So yeah, that is, and again, it's the same as it's the soap opera mentality. You either got to evolve the characters or you've got to keep them the same. But if you keep them the same, they work better in miniseries. You can't have 40 years of character development that effectively it goes to. He changed his costume 4 times and he moved from this location 4 blocks down to this location. That's it. That's his entire life history. It's just like, it's terrible.
To look at Jacob's example here, I mean, and purely from a business perspective, I mean, Jacob, you've done all of these homage characters, and you picked them because you knew people would want to buy them. I mean, there was a market there, and you are filling it, and you have been successful enough at filling that market that you've produced 100 of these, more than 100 of these PDFs, and you've got 2 years worth of material to put together into a book, and you wouldn't be doing that. You wouldn't have raised over $2,000 already on Kickstarter if people didn't want to see these characters. And I totally agree with you, Mike. I think that it's both of these, and Chris, it's both of these factors. It's A, that you didn't see, you haven't read Rom Space Knight before. Do you have a Rom homage, Jacob?
Gan the Astral Knight.
He does have a Rom.
So, they didn't read Rom, and so they don't recognize it. Or B, they loved Rom, and so of course they want to see the homage, Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say, and don't get me wrong, I'm a guy who wishes, Lucha Underground were as big as WWE is now. I mean, I'm not slamming original creators. I'm just saying you're going to hit a ceiling more than likely.
And I work really hard to make everything I make kind of as original as I can make it. And even when I took those public domain characters, like the Green Turtle and the Black, all those characters. Suddenly I spaced his name. I can't believe I forgot his name. We were just talking. The
Black Terror.
Black Terror. Even when I tried to do something new and creative with it, and I got some help on the art with that because we had Denise Jones working on that, and she came up with the visual concept for the Black Terror. And I remember when she wrote and she asked me, has anybody ever made a Black Terror who's, black? Well, actually, yes, they have. On a webcomic, did a few issues of, I believe they called him, and I'm not kidding, the Blackest Terror. But to Chris's point, it was so kind of, it had a very tiny audience. Like no one, had read it. And I said, yeah, we can totally do that. We're going to do it very differently than the Blackest Terror, but we can totally. He's still a chemist, and a pharmacist rather, and he's still the Black Terror, but he's got different things going on in his life. But it's tough when we're creative, when we try to be really creative. I think that Chris is right. I think a lot of folks, they buy stuff that they recognize. They want to buy stuff that they know.
I say if again, stay inside the comics, but not strictly superheroes. Look at the amount of mutant animals we had after the Turtles hit.
Oh,
I mean, immediately enough, the comics kind of like spawned some, but as soon as they become an animated series, there was a billion. Hey, they're like the Turtles, but they're ferrets. They're like the Turtles, but they're sharks. They do skating. So yeah. People just want to, if they like, that market for that kind of, hey, they like it, but they're the key words. If you consider a character, they're like this guy, but that's perfect.
And 30 years after the fact, we're still getting movies that are Die Hard. Only it's
it's on a ship.
Yep.
It's in space. It's
on
in
a
Mars.
train. Yeah.
Yeah, for like half a decade.
It's told backwards.
For like half a decade, it was like every other action movie was it's Die Hard, but in Star Trek, or it's Die Hard, but
Die Hard or Speed.
Yeah.
Well, the reason for that is because Die Hard changed the movie industry.
Yeah.
It is the point that you can look at in history where movies change from one dynamic to another. Action movies had a particular pace that they hit pre-Die Hard. After Die Hard, it's action, 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 one after another. It's non-stop blitz of action.
Oh, yeah.
Plus the pay point. That Die Hard is where they first started paying over $1 million to a single actor for a movie role.
Okay.
Die Hard is the focal point of movies and where they changed.
Well, this is
I will throw in one tiny rejoinder. Okay.
Yeah.
Die Hard was when big studios learned that you could do an action movie that's nothing but pure action. Pure action movies have been playing at drive-ins all over the South, and only us hillbillies noticed them. But Die Hard was when big studios realized, oh wow, okay, we can do this too.
Can we call those grindhouse pictures, or is that the wrong name for that?
I'm a rural Southerner. There'll always be drive-in movies to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it got quiet on the Circle K Ranch.
I've killed another conversation.
No, we should have a big debate about the history of film, because I want to argue with Jacob and talk about the huge influence Star Wars had.
Yes.
But that should probably be a different podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
We're talking about homages here.
Another day. Yeah.
Well, if we're going to talk homages, let's face it, Star Wars is on point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he couldn't get the rights for Flash Gordon. So
absolutely.
Something else is that this whole thing that we're talking about homage characters in comics. Of course, it's not as visible, but it happens in other forms as well. There's superhero novels. I know that very few of us read them, and if we do, we probably are reading superhero novels based on famous characters, like we're reading. Yeah. But I remember reading. I used it in class once, and it's called "Soon I Will Be Invincible."
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, and I love that book, and I taught it in one of my courses on superhero narrative. But as I was reading it, of course, I'm picking out all of these homages to characters from the Justice League, or actually they were all Avengers. All of these Avengers characters in the book, and you've got the Thor guy, except that he's not a guy, he's a girl, and you've got the Iron Man character, and you've got, and it's pretty straightforward, And the reason why the writer did that is because he didn't want to have to explain all of these other superheroes, right? He can use them as shorthand. He can just say, okay, well, this is a guy in a flag suit, and you're like, oh, okay, he's like Captain America, and you go on. You don't, as a reader, you don't need any more explanation.
Exactly. Right? It's like this character, but there you go.
But, and you might not even know the but. And that allows the writer to focus on the characters he really wants to talk about. And so these characters have become a kind of iconic shorthand, where those of us that have been reading comics for a long time, you make a guy who runs really fast, and we immediately compare him to the Flash. I mean, even if the character has nothing in common with the Flash, other than the fact that he runs fast, we're gonna go there.
See, Invincible did it in the first couple of issues.
Oh,
where
yeah,
they're just like, and then they killed them all off really quickly.
Yeah, Invincible's a great example, and also Invincible is a great example of yet another version of the evil Superman, right? Like where,
Superboy.
Well, I'm talking about his father.
Yeah. Okay.
So you've got like the Superman character who you presume is like Superman, and you meet him in the first issue, and he's basically Superman with a mustache, Superman butt with a mustache, and then you find out that he's evil, and which would be incredibly new, except for the fact that there were 100 other versions of that, right?
See, when I saw you had the mustache, that's when I knew.
Well, that's when you knew. It's like the goatee.
And Jason, I think points the way to one of the great dangers about doing these homages is because they can be a great dramatic shortcut, and there's no better example of that than I can think of than Mark Gruenwald's classic Squadron Supreme miniseries, where yes, it's Marvel's version of the Justice League, but early, I mean, like 5 pages in, you've already forgotten that because he's got such a great story to tell. And I think, at least me as a creator, I feel an obligation to give you something more than just, hey, it's the Rainbow Raider again. Because otherwise, to me, if I'm just knocking off somebody else's superhero or supervillain and I don't give you at least one fresh emblem in that, then I'm charging you for my fanfic. And I would feel terrible about that.
Yeah, I totally.
I said the interesting thing about Squadron Supreme as well is they seem to have created different versions as well, like multiple universe versions. Because it's like, hey, we got the original ones that were like the Avengers. Oh crap! Everyone realised that. Okay, we'll change them a little bit more. Then we'll introduce that version, and then we'll do another version. It's like, hey, it's Superior, Hyperion. Sorry, but which one is it? Is Hyperion?
Yeah, my big score at Baltimore Comic-Con was I got a hold of the great leather-bound omnibus edition of that story for half off. And man, did I snatch that up! And I got it goes up through the one-shot graphic novel "Death of a Universe," which I think is like 88 or so. It's right about the time Gruenwald passed, unfortunately, 98 or so, about the time Gruenwald passed. And I was kind of curious if anybody had done anything with the team since then. And I went through the Wikipedia entry, and I'm like, oh my god, I have 3 college degrees and a professor certification, and I'm lost in this plot. There's a team of them made up of like people from 3 different versions from the universe. Mm-hmm. Oh my god, it made DC's pre-crisis continuity seem like a breeze.
One of the things about these homage characters is because they are homages, they are infinitely disposable.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
hey, Jason, the H is silent.
Because they are those things, they can be killed off, and so they do. Like Marvel and DC. Like DC created a team of Avengers that showed up in Justice League, and proceeded to kill them off. And then Morrison invented a team of them in Multiversity, which I love that book, and he killed off most of them. You know. And the reason why he can do that is because no one gives a shit about them, because we have the real version over, somewhere else. It probably in your nostalgic brain. That's where the real version is.
Hey, Walt, did we have someone on the podcast a week or 2 back who had a comic called The Crossover Agents?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember. Wasn't it the same kind of concept where they're going to different universes and getting involved with different homage characters? Or did I remember?
They're basically bringing in every universe has they call them dimes or dimensionalities. This is Vince White's Powerverse that we're talking about. And if you haven't picked up Powers That Be or the Powerverse free comic that you can get on their site, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because Will Power, the main character of the universe, has the most original superpower origin I've ever seen. And it's that much fun when you just wrap your head around it. But there are all these different dimensions, all these dimensionalities that basically, because of Will Power's origin, now have the barriers of their universes are so thin, people are crossing over back and forth, and he creates a crosswalk agency that can basically recruit all these heroes from all these different indie comic creator who are also creator-owned universes, and then can bring them together for a mini series every once in a while, so that it doesn't intrude on the individual creator's story. Really, really cool concept, fun stuff.
Okay, interesting thing. We've got homage characters between universes. What about ones that actually exist in universe? So, like technically speaking, they're not homages but you've got the duplicates, the Spider-Man, the Venoms, the Anti-Venoms, the Carnage.
You got the entire Bat family.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Exactly. It's Batman, but it's a girl. It's Batman, but it's a boy. It's a Batman, but it's a dog. So
It's Batman, but he's Mexican. It's Batman, but he's British. It's Batman, but he's from Central Africa.
Yeah,
He's Batman, but he's got a bow and arrow.
I work alone.
Again,
while standing in front of his entire family.
do they count? Or do
I think it's great because those guys, like Batman's totem is bats. Everybody else's totem is Batman.
Yeah.
They're not actually they're not copying bats. They're copying him.
Yeah. Oh, I miss Batman Inc. That was a good book.
Except for Moon Knight, but we can talk about him later.
Yeah. Don't get me started on Moon Knight.
Well, speaking of old issues, I have a completely off-topic thing that I wanted to throw in whenever we're reaching the end.
Go for it.
Oh, okay. All right. So Jacob and I had probably the nerdiest conversation that we'll ever have on this already nerdy podcast about a potential fight between the Punisher and Black Widow.
The gauntlet has been thrown, Chris.
Yes. Now, purely in the interest of science, I went to what I considered to be the closest thing we'll ever have to an argument settler on this, the 1980s Phaser Rip Marvel superhero game. And I double checked, and for what it's worth, in the viewpoint of the closest thing we have to an objective source, the Punisher is rated at amazing fighting ability, 50 points, whereas poor Natasha is a rank lower at incredible at 40.
Yes. What about? He probably has better gun skills than her too.
Yes, because that's his thing.
Black Widow has super soldier serum, correct?
Not at that point.
I thought she did.
Now, on the other side of this, I would actually say that this is a fight that would never happen because both characters understand that the lethality of of other.
You're so silly. And, of course, it will happen. It will happen when someone will buy the comic book,
right? But what would actually occur is they would both find a place that they know each other would frequent due to habit or whatever, and just set up a sniper perch. So since they're both in different areas, just looking down at this one street corner, they're just going to basically fall asleep.
I think that all of these debates are always settled by the same answer, which is it depends on whose comic the fight is.
That's true.
And that
or if you're watching the Bat in the Sun videos.
So if Punisher is more likely to have a comic book than Black Widow, which is a tragedy. I'm not saying I agree with that, but it's true.
Well, let's face it. Punisher, his superpower, murder.
Yeah.
Black Widow just had a great run by Mark Waid this last year. If you didn't read it, you should check it out.
Well, he's going to write Velvet too.
Velvet just got picked up by a studio.
Yeah, they did. Yes.
Well, Velvet's a good example. That's basically Moneypenny from James Bond, except she has incredible adventures. And if you haven't read it, you're an asshole. Go fucking read it. But get made into a movie. And actually, Chris, your company, Green Ronin, you guys
Green
are.
Ronin is doing that.
Sorry.
I was saying the exact same thing. Green Ronin is doing that.
Yeah, Vigilante. It's going to be made into Netflix is doing it as a series, and Green Ronin's making it into. They're adapting a comic book into an RPG using the Age engine instead of Mutants and Mastermind. I'm not making any comment about that, but Chris, so that's you guys.
Well, it's a company that I have freelanced for in the past and seem to be freelancing for in the future, but I'm not in that. I'm not. My security clearance doesn't run that high anymore. So honestly, this is the first I've heard of it.
Rewind. Are we talking about the Vigilante character from the comics?
No, we're talking about Velvet.
Oh, Velvet.
Wait, hang on. Green Ronin's doing a Velvet adaptation?
Not that I've ever heard. I mean, but again, my security clearance isn't as high as it used to be. So
I'm going to have to go back to the source I saw.
I saw the Green Ronin Vigilante thing announced, and I saw the Velvet TV series or whatever it was picked up, but I didn't combine the two together.
So Green Ronin is doing a Vigilante product.
Yeah, Walt told me about this. Walt, which comic are we talking about here? It's an indie, right?
For what exactly?
Green Ronin.
Green Ronin's doing something. They're doing Lazarus.
Oh yeah, yes, definitely doing Lazarus. Yes.
So a Vigilante, not the Vigilante.
There you go.
Okay.
I just saw the word Vigilante.
All right, because I'm thinking you mean the great, amazing series in the '80s that ended with Adrian blowing his brains out in the last.
Yeah, good book.
I have to quit smoking meth before these podcasts. It messes with my short-term memories, but I'm just trying to be. I'm trying to be high energy. So
It's the liquor store in the mornings, Mike.
Yeah. All right, so Lazarus, Green Ronin, and wasn't Netflix picking that up, or they? I thought I saw something.
It's Amazon is going to try and pick it up.
Okay. It's going to be a TV show and an RPG. Which will be more popular? We'll find out. But okay, so that's happening. And that's
Everything's
good
being
news.
picked up by everybody at the moment.
There's
There's
people about Jacob's book, which is amazing.
yes. Jacob's book is on Kickstarter right now. Look for Superpowered Legends on Kickstarter, and you can back it right now. It's already funded, so you're getting the book.
That's right.
Now we're just,
Yes, the book is going to be made, and I have a couple of facts I'd like to take care of because I get these questions all the time.
Take it away, motherfucker.
That was
Will
brilliant.
there be
saving that one.
Hero Lab files? No, there will not be Hero Lab files. Rogue Genius Games does not have anyone on their payroll who can transfer the rules to Hero Lab.
Okay,
So that's
Jacob, I can do that for you if you want me to do it.
I'll
say now.
You'll need to speak with Owen Stevens about that.
I have Hero Lab. I'm more than happy to input files for you should you need it. So that is not just to anyone out there. That's not an official offer. That's just a suggestion.
Okay.
But hey, there you go.
Talk to his agent.
Yeah, you will want to speak to Owen Stevens about that because if you're willing to spend hours and hours and hours with all these characters,
I quite like doing it, to be honest. It's quite a little thing. So yeah, that's cool.
Therapy for Aiden. Believe me, he needs it.
Yes, damn true.
the other question that I often get is an Icons version going to be a stretch goal? No. There is no Icons version as a stretch goal with this particular Kickstarter. However, Fainting Goat Games has always produced Icons versions of the Superpowered Legends, which are called the Iconic Legends. After we have totally combined the Superpowered Legends sourcebook, knowing what we are going to be dealing with and all the characters that are going to be in it, then we will be handing it over to Fainting Goat Games to produce an Icons version. That will be an entirely separate Kickstarter of its own to help fund their conversion time.
Yeah. That's cool.
So that's pretty much what I got on that. Otherwise, like I said, the Kickstarter is funded. We're hitting stretch goals. Please, if you're interested in it, even if you're not interested in it, please just donate $1. If you want an Icons version, go donate $1 because it'll mean more stuff will go in it, and that means more stuff that will eventually be in the Icons version.
That's right. That's right. You can't do the Icons book if we don't have the Mutants and Masterminds one to start with.
Exactly. Give me $1, spread the word to your friends and family, have them donate $1. $1 is all I ask from anyone and everyone.
lenticular cover? Stretch goal? No? Okay.
I can do another cover for the Icons version that's completely different if you want that.
All right. Well, hey, we'll keep that on the table. I'm guessing we'll be somewhere in 2018 before we start talking about that in earnest. So
More than likely.
yeah.
I think there should be a cover with all the fainting goats on it posed as Superpower Legends characters.
Maybe get some Snack Cake comics in there.
An all goat version. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
An all goat version.
I totally agree with the snack cakes. That definitely has to go.
Hey guys, it's time to wrap things up. Now that we're making goat jokes. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Anyone on the panel have anything we want to mention before we wrap it up?
I got one last thing. I'm starting a new blogging effort. I've joined a group of other bloggers, and we're writing about comics and film and geek culture. It's called The Fifth World, and I have first couple of entries up on it, in which I do I respond to the latest kerfuffle between Mark Waid and the Diversity in Comics YouTube channel. where I was, which made the media, and my mother sent me that article, and so I responded to it, and that was. But anyway, check it out. Fifth World. We're talking about comics and games, and I'm only one part of it. It used to be the Howling Curmudgeons blog, so we're sort of picking up that baton and moving forward.
So if they want to find it, how do they find it?
The Fifth World. Just put the Fifth World in. It's a blog. It's a blog spot. So just put the Fifth World into Google, and it should come right up. We also have a Facebook page and stuff like that. But yeah.
I put in the Fifth World, and I get Native American mythology and New Age prophecy.
No, we're new. Okay, so try us on Facebook first.
Okay. All right. I'll look for it on Facebook then. Are you spelling it out, or are you doing 5th?
FIFTH.
Oh, that's what I was doing, and I got okay. Well, I'll look for you on Facebook.
Point taken. I'll address that issue.
Got to get your SEO on point, man. All right. Chris, Wald, you got anything?
Well, if you'd like to support independent game creation and homage characters, you could head to your favorite PDF dealer once you're done giving Jacob all your money and pick up a copy of World Defenders: The Summit, and that will enable me to get out from under the mountain of debt I've had from my endless succession of flat tires, and I can spend more time making games for you and less time hanging out at truck stops begging for change.
I have nothing that can top that. That
is a worthy endeavor.
You can find the Summit under the Fading Goat Games banner on RPG Now and Drive-Thru RPG in our Mutants and Masterminds section.
Hard on that book too, Chris. I remember.
I'm sorry?
You worked really hard on that book too.
That book has caused me more pain and more joy than anything I've made since Noir, and that's saying a lot.
Let's add to the joy.
Thank you.
All right. Well, hey, folks, we got to wrap things up so I can go pick up my, speaking of things that cause you pain and joy, my young child is at daycare. So thanks again for tuning into the BANF podcast, and we will catch you next time.